Iate sti pelletieri she mai deskizini initially Billigana Basha Shin Kimachini Dasha Che Billigana Dashanale. Welcome back to Res Ball, where this time we're going to talk about Iowa sharpshooter, 3-point sniper Payton Sandfort. Similar to what we did with John Tanji last time. This is a guy that has maybe the easiest transition into arguing for, hey, he was the man, but he's going to be fantastic and be a role player. Let's get it and into Payton Sandfort right about now. So Payton Sandfort is from Waukee, Iowa. In our latest episode of All White People, Waukee was named because they wanted an Indian name, quote unquote, for this town, and they thought it had some kind of meaning in the Algonquin language. But it turns out that it was just a shortened version of Milwaukee, and the story is it was named after the Milwaukee Railroad Company. Whether or not that's true, I don't know anybody from Waukee. Let me know. But I mean, come on, do your research next time, people. So at Waukee High School, which is where Payton Sandfort is from, 16.6 points per game as a senior, 7.7 rebounds, and then 3.1 assists. Also at the Waukee High School, Payton Sandfort won a state title in golf there. So shout out to Scott in the Slack chat. He's always saying any great shooter is really good at golf. So here's another guy that, yes, Scott, another really good shooter that is good at golf. So it does track. And I do think this idea has some, not just some, but a lot of merit behind it. Like Ray Allen is really good at golf. Larry Bird is really good at golf. Steph Curry is really good at golf. Go check it out. I think Scott's main argument for this is that it has to do with like hand-eye coordination, which I don't know if this is originally from Scott or he's getting it from somewhere else, but it does track. And I'm like, you know what? I think there's a lot to this. So if you want to find out who the next great shooter is, go to the golf course. And then last but not least, Payton Sandfort did graduate with a degree in finance. So between Obina Anachili Killen, John Tanjay, and Payton Sandfort, if I'm a superstar and I have any say in my GM front offices, undrafted free agents or second round picks, hey, bring in these guys because they're not only going to help us on the basketball court, they're going to help me off of it with all these degrees in finance and real estate and business and accounting, all that stuff. But let's get into Payton Sandfort's actual basketball stats and what he looks like out there on the court. So as I said, a sharpshooter. Shout out to Bryce Simon, aka Motor City Hoops, the co-host of the Game Theory podcast with Sam Bassini. He's the first one to put me on to Payton Sandfort, I believe like 2 years ago. It was coming out of his sophomore season where Bryce was like, I think this is going to be the next Iowa guy. Really buying him as a shooter. He looks like he's like 6'7", 210-ish. There's a lot to like about the kid. That tracks. Every single year at Iowa, Payton Sandfort just put up a ton of threes, 2.7 per game as a freshman in just 10 and a half minutes. 20.8 minutes per game as a sophomore goes up to 5.2. I mean, that's a ton in 20 minutes. Then as a junior, gets to be the guy, 30.5 minutes per game, 7.3 3-point attempts per game. And then as a fourth year senior, 7.5 3-point attempts per game. You got to consider this in the overall package, and I'll jump ahead to the advanced stuff here because I mean, this is the number one argument for Payton Sandfort and why anybody should draft him. And I do think Payton Sandfort absolutely should be drafted. 3-point attempt rate career is 59%. And really, there's only 1 year where it was above 60 or excuse me, below 60%. And that was as his fourth year senior at 54.4%. But really, it was because he was the number one option. They didn't have a lot of other go-to guys there. So they needed him to create a little bit more. But normally this is like 60% of his shots are going to come from 3-point range. And then in the NBA, I think you're going to see that number go up even more, that 3-point attempt rate in 65, 70% maybe even, because you buy another shot. So final season at Iowa for Payton Sandfort, 16.7 points per game, pulled in 6 rebounds, had 2.9 assists per game, 0.8 steals per game, and 0.7 blocks per game to just 1.8 turnovers. Shooting splits for Payton Sandfort are 48.8% from 2-point range, 34.0% from 3-point range, and then 89.1% from the free throw line. Stop and pause on the 3-point percentage. Across 4 years, 35.7% on 5.7 attempts per game. The 3-point attempt rate for all 4 years, when you average that out, is 59%, as I said before. So I understand there's some people out there, if he's a shooter, how come his percentages aren't that great? Go to the free throw percentage, 89.6% across 4 years, 93.8% as a freshman, 86.4% as a sophomore, 91.1% as a junior, 89.1% as a senior. Again, anybody out there that believes free throw percentage has anything to do with your shooting mechanics, this is the top of the heap. 2 years above 90%, all 4 years above 86%. You don't shoot that well from the free throw line if you don't have picture perfect mechanics, which I do think Payton Sandfort does. And as a junior and as a senior, really had to take a lot of tough shots. Also, should not be lost on anybody that Payton Sandfort had to deal with shoulder injuries really his junior year and senior year, fighting through that kind of stuff, but seems to be healthy now. Went to the NBA Combine, the G League Elite Camp. So any medical stuff we'll check out there. Final 2 seasons, again, this is where he was the guy. The other thing to track in this is the assist numbers go up. It's not like gaudy, but it's still over 98 one assists as a junior to just 45 turnovers. And then as a senior, 95 assists to just 59 turnovers. That's a really good assist to turnover rate, 2-1 as a junior. Didn't quite get 2-1 as a senior, but it's still really good. Again, it screams, all it screams NBA role player on offense, where he puts up a ton of threes, over 240 threes as a junior, 240, over 240 threes as a senior. The shooting around 90% at the free throw line, and then really takes care of the ball, is able to pass over 2 assists per game, under 2 assists or under 2 turnovers per game. All of it screams, yes, this is a shooter that we can rely upon to kick the ball out and not turn it over and still maintain really good efficiency. Well, the efficiency part is where the issues come in for like argue for Payton Sandfort. 55.7% as a freshman true shooting percentage, 54.3% as a sophomore, 60.8% true shooting as a junior, and then it went down again to 54.5% as a senior true shooting. All of that averaged down into 56.6% true shooting. This is like the opposite of John Tonje, where you see he's really not that efficient like you would think he would be. Why is that? Well, let's jump the measurements for once and go straight into the shot chart. Payton Sandfort can't finish. 93 shots at the rim, which I believe is the career high this last year. Only sank 52 of them. That's 55.9%. That's really the part where it drug the overall percentage down. And I mean, even 5 percentage points more, and you're looking at probably like 56% true shooting. Not an athlete, not a finisher. The comp for me did not end up being Duncan Robinson, but think somebody like that, where you're just telling him to fire away, and that's really all you want him to do. And you're not going to ask him to pressure the rim. Sure, he has a little bit of ball handling, but this isn't something you're going to ask. You really are asking him to shoot these 201 threes like he did from above the break, draining 73 of them for 36.3%. Great. And then where you need him to get better is in the corners. Payton Sandfort was only 10 of 45 shots in the corners for 22.2% as a bad percentage. And it's inexcusable for somebody that tracks as this high level of a shooter all the other times. And your number one thing is the 3-point shooter. I need you to be red from everywhere from beyond 3. 6 of 23 from left corner, 4 of 22 from right corner. That's 26.1% from left corner, 18.2% from right corner. That's the number one spot Payton Sandfort has to work on, because everything else is fine. Even from the left wing, 25 of 80, that's 31.3%. That's below average, but you're like, how many guys can get off 80 shots? And you go watch this Iowa tape, they really lost out. They don't have like Tony Perkins and point guard anymore. Payton Sandfort has to create a lot of tough shots. Another guy that has to catch a lot of grenades. There's no John Blackwell like the John Tonje. There's definitely no Dylan Harper like the Ace Bailey in this 3-player star to role player. So he still has to get up that number of threes. He still has to generate offense and assists to be number one guy, but he's still able to get off 80 shots from left wing and drain 31.3% of them. And he's still able to get off 80 shots from top of the key and shoot 40% from there. Again, track the free throw percentage numbers, track shooting 40% on 80 shots from a long part of the court. That screams you're a good 3-point shooter. And then 16 of 41 from the right wing, 39%. If you're going to argue with me about, I don't know how good of a shooter Payton Sandfort is, like, I really do not know what to tell you, because all the indicators are there, and you just go watch the film and understand, like, this guy had to take a lot of tough shots. And if you scale back his role and just tell him shoot threes, you're going to be very, very happy with what comes out. 55 shots in the mid range, 41.8%. That's okay. Again, I'm going to kind of hand wave this stuff because everything's like 18 from left baseline or 11 from right, 13 from right elbow, 13 from left elbow. Again, this is not something you're going to ask a Payton Sandfort to do in the NBA, especially anybody that's transitioning into more of a simple role as a shooter. If they shooting threes, then you don't really care about the rest of the package. The John Tonje one is one of the exceptions where you're like, okay, we feel comfortable with this, but I think Payton Sandfort, like, why bring up Duncan Robinson? It is going to be somebody more like that, where you're like, we just want him to shoot, we want him to run off screens, we want him to be in the corner, and everything else is just gravy. I'll get to my comp here in a minute, but I do go to two different spots for the measurements for Payton Sandfort because he did go to the G League Elite Camp. If you're watching this on YouTube, he is way down here. I know that the print is tiny, but Payton Sandfort's here. But if you notice, they don't put his standing reach and they don't put his wingspan. Why in the world would they do that? Well, Payton Sandfort went to the combine in 2024. So I'll give you those measurements here in a minute. But this year at the G League Elite Camp, Payton Sandfort measured in the same thing he did last year, 6'6" without shoes. So he is a legitimate 6'7" in shoes, 213.6 pounds. Go back to last year. So shout out to hawkcentral.com. This is where I'm getting the information from last year's combine. Last year, measured in at 6'6". Like I said before, 212 pounds. So 1.6 pounds. Oh my goodness. He let himself go. Wingspan for Payton Sandfort is 6'8". So we're looking at a guy that's like 6'7", 213 with a 6'8" wingspan. The wingspan is not ideal, what you would want. But again, what we're arguing for here is somebody that's taking 60% of his shots from three. You want him to drain them at a higher rate. And once you eliminate the idea of like, we need you to finish, we need you to create more offense, I imagine that true shooting percentage is going to be at least 56% because he can do all of those other things as a shooter. Probably has to adjust to be more of a movement shooter, but you trust him to shoot from the catch. You trust him to shoot off the dribble because he had to do all of those things. At Iowa, my comp for Payton Sandfort is Sam Hauser. Anybody that watched that Celtics team, like that's really all Sam Hauser does is like chug up threes, chug up threes, chug up threes. I would not be surprised if Payton Sandfort ends up being a Celtic because he's the same type of player. I mean, I don't personally like watching the Celtics because they are such a robotic machine of like 3-point shots, 3-point shots. If you're not named Jaylen Brown, if you're not named Jason Tatum, you're probably just chucking up threes. And if you're an undrafted guy or if you're a second round guy, that's absolutely what they want out of you. And I think Payton Sandfort is somebody that definitely tracks that way of like, hey, we just need you to shoot threes and we know you can do it. And we don't really care about what else you can do. Like the Sam Hauser ended up being there. He can play small forward. He can play a small ball power forward, and everything else that he brings, whether it's rebounding or passing or whatever, is just gravy. Because all we need you to do, man, is just shoot threes at a high rate, and we trust that you're going to be able to do that. So Payton Sandfort, Sam Hauser. I don't really like to do the white guy to white guy comp, but this one, in this regard, I was like, yeah, that seems to be really on point. And why I didn't go with a Duncan Robinson, I will say it forever. Another thing I'll say it forever. I think there'll never be another Duncan Robinson. Remember, I was at Michigan when Duncan Robinson was there. I've told this story a couple times in a couple different places, but like I remember when it was like Karis LeVert and man, I forget who the other guy was on the team, but they were both kind of like wings that handled the ball, and everybody thought they were the draft picks. And then my mom went to come watch a game with me, and she played ball all the way into college, was a point guard. And we're sitting down watching everybody warm up, and she's like, "Who's that skinny white guy over there?" I'm like, "Oh, that's Duncan. He's just kind of like the 3-point shooter." And she's like, "I think he'll be the NBA player. I actually like him. He seems like he'd be the one just because of his role and like he doesn't need the ball and all that stuff." And I was like, "Ah, get out of here, mom. What do you know?" But she was right. And Duncan didn't score very much. He was never the man like a Payton Sandfort was. He was really just kind of, the gangly shooting white guy on Michigan, and Miami saw that. So that's why I didn't put that here with Payton Sandfort. I think that is like a one of one type of find where you're essentially like the fifth guy, the sixth guy on a college basketball team that ends up being a double digit 3-point shooter and integral to some finals runs. Again, I don't think Payton Sandfort is going to be that. I also don't think he's the movement shooter. Like Duncan Robinson is one of one in that regard of how he can run and move and shoot from a variety of angles and things. I do think Payton Sandfort is more of like catch and shoot, maybe do a little run. Again, like the Sam Hauser, defensively limited, sure. No, you do not argue for wingspan or athleticism. You're just saying shoot, shoot, and shoot some more, man, please. And you'll be happy with that. I have Payton Sandfort at 26, only because I think like the premium on shooters is so high. And in this draft class, after you get outside the lottery, it's like, how can you find another volume 3-point shooter like this that you can easily say scale back a roll? We don't need him to shoot at the rim. We don't need him to jack up mid-range shots. Even the paint numbers are pretty good, 26 to 59. But again, we don't really need that stuff from him as somebody that's in our rotation at the back end. Maybe sometimes when everybody's hurt can come in and shoot in space like a Sam Hauser. That's why I still think Payne Sandfort for me is like back end of the first round. I could, if you want to say he's more like in the 40s, 45 range, I get that because again, defensive limitations. It might make him like Sam Hauser, where you're like, I don't think we'll ever really start this guy, but you're always going to keep him in the rotation because he can get up a ton of threes and he can drain them. I don't know how many times I can say that. And again, in this NBA, that's absolutely what you're looking for, especially at the end of round one, where you're like, I just need to find somebody that I know I can plug in right away as a senior, knows his role, knows his place, knows defensive positioning. Sure, you have athletic limitations, but he's at least been seasoned. And I know he knows what to do on both ends of the court. So that's why I really like Payton Sandfort here at the end of round one at 26. Some video stuff to look at on YouTube. Big Ten men's basketball, Big Ten Network has a ton of Payton Sandfort stuff. They're probably the best resource just in terms of going to watch him and see what his game looks like. College basketball scouting put out a Payton Sandfort 2024-2025 NBA draft scouting highlight. Go check that out from college basketball scouting. I mean, really, it ends up being the Big Ten Network and like video coordinator mixes apparently every now and then. And you might have to dig a little bit more in the last season because some people really tried to argue for him last season and go dig up the stuff from last year. I tried to find that, but I couldn't really see it if anybody kept it around or if it stayed in circulation. So if you do have a video from last year on Payton Sandfort, get at me, send me a comment, send me an email, whatever. And then the last one is the Hawkeye Report. The Hawkeye Report did a bunch of post-game things with Payton Sandfort. So if you want to get an idea of what the young man is like post-game and losses and victories, all that stuff, it's there. But Payton Sandfort, again, one of the easier guys for me of arguing, like, sure, he was the man at Iowa the last 2 years, but he's a fantastic three-point shooter that can easily transition into a Sam Hauser type role in the NBA. And to me, is the end of a round one type of guy, but absolutely at the very latest being like 45-ish middle second round. Yeah, thank you so much for listening to us. We will catch you next time with a whole new position group. Agone.